Ironically, this would be exactly what the doctor ordered for the dollar, because if you raise the price of oil from the current 75 or 80 or whatever it is, if you can get that up to 500 or 1,000, you create a tremendous demand for dollars. There would be no dollar crisis for some time to come if you could get the price of oil up at that level. And you can also see all of these wonderful Malthusian green jobs programs, right? All the wind energy, the windmills and the solar cells and the electric cars, things that are not economical today, that require government subsidies, would become economical. They would become economically feasible, of course, in a general context of complete immiseration.
So that would force the acceptance of the carbon tax.
Well, at that point, you wouldn't even need a carbon tax, because you'd be bringing it in through the price. In other words, all of the people who want the carbon tax are trying to raise the price of energy, because they hate energy. They hate energy production. They hate industry. They hate technology, science, progress.
And by the way, they say this. They want a post-industrial world because it's a finance system against true productivity and their entire Malthusian system. So it appears the only move they've got is A, attacking Iran and other nations, and B, staging domestic operations to try to stymie the populist movement that is voting out incumbents across the political spectrum.
Yes, and above all, this idea of raising the price of oil, which would for them be a godsend. Now, there are a couple of other things that are going on. The neocons were kicked out, by and large, from the Bush-Cheney regime during 2007. And the landmark on that was that National Intelligence Estimate of December 2007, which said Iran has no nuclear weapons program. They said that with high confidence. Now, that meant that Cheney, essentially, his goose was cooked. That was his last gasp, really, of getting the war going with Iran. Now, there's an attempt to come back and change that finding with a new National Intelligence Estimate, which will, of course, now say, we think that Iran does have a nuclear weapons program. All kinds of signals on that coming from Mrs. Clinton, from Panetta, from Gates. The U.S. has actually been telling the other Perm 5 members at the United Nations that this will be coming very soon. And they even say they won't publish the NIE itself, but they'll publish the findings, which will simply be, believe us, trust us, Iran has a nuclear weapons program. Behind this, in turn, the Brzezinski group, in kicking out the neocons, had promised that they could take over Iran with the color revolution,
but
the
they
green
failed.
revolution of Mousavi. And it's failed now. This has not gone anywhere. So that doesn't work. You've also got the idea that Russian policy has become less stern, less formidable, let's say. We now have this sort of dual power situation of Putin and Medvedev. Now, Putin was, of course, a very tough customer, and even though it was very unlikely that Russia would risk war for the sake of Iran, there were plenty of things Russia could do to make life very uncomfortable for the Anglo-Americans in case of some kind of attack. And just the fact that the Russians, RIA Novosti was, for example, one of the big sources for these things like Operation Bite, which was the attack on Iran planned for Good Friday, April 2007, and similar things. We also had the visit of Putin to Ahmadinejad in October 2007, which was pretty much at the height of the danger. So there was a deterrent effect by having a strong leader like Putin in power. Now you have Medvedev, Putin. This is no longer functioning quite so well. Another big thing, Petraeus, the fact that the Obama counterinsurgency around McChrystal failed, and now we've got Petraeus, Bush's general, the king of the neocons, the probable neocon candidate for president in 2012. His power has become immense in the bureaucracy. And if you look at the literature, you'll see that the Central Command under Petraeus planned an attack on Iran to the point where they now consider this plan to be mature, right? If you read this essay that I've written, people say, yes, the CENTCOM has now put it all together. We didn't really have a plan in the past, but now we have it because CENTCOM did it. And, of course, they did it during the time that Petraeus was there. So the strengthening of the neocons with Petraeus, this tremendous weakness of the Anglo-Americans because of the bankruptcy of the dollar and, therefore, their desire, really, for some kind of an event in the Middle East like 1973, the failure of this green revolution. There's also another thing, which is that Hezbollah has been acquiring some rather sophisticated missiles. They've got this thing called the M600, I believe it is, which is something like 300 kilometers, but it has a guidance system, right? The missiles that Hezbollah was using in the 2006 Lebanon war, they were essentially Russian World War II.
Why on earth would Hezbollah start another war and elicit an Israeli attack?
Well, they wouldn't. This is part of a deterrent system. In other words, you can think of Hezbollah as a kind of an aircraft carrier for Iran close to the Israeli border, and they're able to deliver this deterrent. In other words, there's already a situation of conventional deterrent. So Iran has pushed ahead with an array of 4 or 5 new medium-range and intermediate-range ballistic missiles, the Shahabs and others, right? We could go through the names, but they're there. And then you've got these other missiles in southern Lebanon.
Webster, stay there. We got a break. When we come back, though, when do you see the attack happening? Do you believe this with the Iranian leader saying that he's got the intel, the attack is on the next 3 months? What's the second country he's saying is going to be attacked? Is it Lebanon or is it Syria? Stay with us, Webster Tarpley. All right, open phones coming up in the next segment and into the third hour, 1-800-259-9231. Our last segment with Webster, and we've got his excellent articles up at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com, like this one. China surpasses U.S. in energy consumption, while the Malthusian crackpots of the Obama regime fiddle with cap and trade. That's at Tarpley.net. Webster, do you agree with Ahmadinejad that it is green-lighted, it will happen in the next 3 months, or is he being made to believe that? Is there any way to avert this? When is the attack on Iran coming, and what will the aftermath be?
Well, I'm not sure when he said this, but depending on when he said it, he might be agreeing with me, because in this article that I put up Thursday of last week...
He said it yesterday in Press TV.
I speculated saying, look, I don't have any specific information, but the one thing you know about these attacks is that they tend to occur in the dark of the moon, right? The new moon, when there's no moonlight, because of the way that these stealth cruise missiles and planes, if you can see them, you can hit them. But if you can't see them, then it's very, very hard. And the timetable of the new moon for the coming 3 months, August 10th, September 8th, October 7th. This I write at the end of that piece on Iran. I found an article by Arnaud de Borchgrave, an old adversary of mine, used to work for UPI, now works for Newsmax, and he says Obama would like to have 3 wars, and if he has 3 wars, he can have 2 houses of Congress still under his control, which seems to be suggesting an October surprise. So if you look at the October 7th date, I have no way of knowing, right? But that could be a good guess, or maybe not. I don't know. Certainly, when it happens, right? The Iranians have these missiles: the Fajr, the Shahab, the Ghadr, the Ashura, and the Sajil. These are all 2,000 kilometers. Some of them have MIRVs. They have multiple warheads.
And they've got more than 12,000 anti-ship missiles as well.
Yes, they do. And the part, however, on Israel, what I'm concerned about most is the ways that this could now go nuclear, because there are such ways. A guy writing in the Asia Times speculates that if you had Hezbollah firing, first of all, this spray of tens of thousands of Katyushkas that they have, the Russian World War II vintage, and putting among them these medium-range ballistic or short-range ballistic missiles that Hezbollah now seems to have, maybe 100 or 200. And if the Iranians were firing their conventional missiles at the same time, they might be able to overwhelm the Israeli defense system. Now, the Israelis have an ABM system, which is layered, and it's Iron Dome at the bottom, then David Sting, then Arrow, and then the U.S.-made Patriot. But again, this is subjected to a complete barrage, right? Salvos that are simultaneous.
Well, how are they going to sell preemptively attacking Iran, then Iran fires back, and they're going to decry Iran fighting back? I mean, this is insane.
Well, naturally, they'll do 2 things. If Iran strikes against Israel, they'll demonize that, of course. And if Iran strikes against U.S. bases, say in the United Arab Emirates or Saudi Arabia or Iraq, they can demonize that.
And we know Iran does have sleeper teams everywhere.
Here's the other thing. Some time ago, and I cite this in that article that you mentioned, the scenario for U.S. encirclement in Iraq it depends on this route Tampa, right? There's a very long supply line that goes from Kuwait City to the Baghdad region. All of those other countries, everybody else, 35,000 NATO and other foreign non-U.S. troops have all left. If you had a decisive effort by the Iranians together with Muqtada Sadr of the Mahdi army to cut route Tampa, to cut that supply line, that could become very critical. Same thing in Afghanistan, because the supply line has to go through Pakistan where the hostility is building. You've also got the fact that the U.S. has forces in a total of 11 countries to try to encircle Iran.